Hello, I am TESH Beckham, and you are tuned in to TESH Talk TV. Please make sure you subscribe to my channel. I am making my first video tonight. This is November 11th, 2019, and I hope you enjoy it. One of the reasons why I decided to do a YouTube page is because of my students. I've always been open about my childhood and a lot of the things that I experienced growing up and also in my adult life. And they asked me to make a page, and they said that they feel like I've motivated and encouraged them so much that I should be able to reach more than just the kids in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale area. I want this channel to be motivating and empowering, especially to the youth, all youth. I have worked with inner city youth. I enjoy working with inner city youth. I've worked at the detention center. I've worked at the jails. I've worked at alternative schools. I've worked at regular schools, but I really like working with the bad kids. I enjoy it. So I would love for this page to motivate and encourage and empower, like I said before, our youth, especially the inner city youth, who I feel like sometimes on some levels they miss out on opportunities, either for lack of knowledge in the family or just people just not caring. So speaking of people not caring, I'm going to get into my childhood. I actually have a student with me who wants to remain anonymous. They're going to be asking me some questions that are coming to mind. I told them to just let it just flow freely. And here we go. So I grew up in Florida, in South Florida, in a small city known as Pompano Beach, Florida. It's probably a little north of Fort Lauderdale. I think Kodak Black is from Pompano. Kodak Black is from Pompano, right? And it's a really small town. They used to like pick beans and stuff like that back in the days. Of course, after slavery was over with. I landed in Florida at the age, I think, of 3 years old. I was born in Tacoma, Washington, Seattle, for those of you who don't know where Tacoma is, and wound up in South Florida. I was adopted, I think, when I was about 7, and by my relatives who took me in. So my father is actually Veterans Day today. I love you, Dad. Both of my parents are deceased. My father is a Vietnam War veteran, and because of the war, he came back crazy as hell and doing drugs, which caused my siblings and myself to not have a good a typical childhood. I am from my father's second marriage. My siblings are from his first marriage. We were all born in Tacoma, Washington. So for me, by the time my mom met my dad, she was 15 and he was 25, which is gross. My mom told that story. I met my mom when I was 17 over the phone and 21 face to face. My father was a drug dealer at some point in his life. He also worked for UPS. He married his first wife and had 2 kids, divorced her, and then married my mom and had me. Both my parents were drug addicts. My mom told me that she did drugs while she was pregnant with me. So I'm very thankful that I don't have any issues because of that. She said as soon as she found out she was pregnant, she stopped. My mom also was a stripper. That was something that my father introduced her to make money. It was fast money, it was quick money, it was big money, and we know, bigger than working a regular job. And it was also a way for them to be able to buy their drugs. So my mom said that she danced until she was about 7 or 8 months pregnant with me because she didn't have a belly. So again, I'm very candid and open about my life. And one of the reasons why I've shared some of my stories with my students is because um, it allows me to connect and bond with them and let them know that there's someone else out there who is normal. I look normal. I am normal. You know, I speak normal. I dress normal. I'm always happy, which is why I got this shirt on. I'm always smiling and I'm very pleasant. I mean, at times, you know, I got a little temper, so I can give you a little attitude, but it's not my way of life. I like to be as calm as possible. And I share my story with my students because I relate to them and I want them to know that you don't, because I think a lot of times when you grow up with when you have these backgrounds, you assume that you're going to end up on drugs like your parents or stripping like your parents or living a hard life or that, you know, you're going to end up just like them. And sometimes you live with family members or people around you who tell you that you're going to end up like your parents. And I share with them that both of my parents were addicts, and I share with them that my mom was a stripper, and that, you know, these things, because I didn't turn out like that. I'm like completely the opposite, night and day. And I want them to know that your background and who your parents are and where you come from doesn't dictate who you become. You dictate who you become. And they can influence that journey though, because, you know, my childhood was very rough for me. And I feel like that affected how I turned out thus far. I feel like that affected me negatively in regards to my goals, not as a person. I decided to be a very happy person and a very positive person in spite of some of the things that I experienced in my life. But in regards to some of my goals, I haven't really obtained a lot of the goals, and I feel like there's a subconscious energy there that I am working on purging as soon as possible. I've been working on purging my whole life. Do you have any questions for me thus far?
How long did you have to spend time with your mom, and how was spending time with your mom?
Well, I kind of met her. My mom was in prison. I met my mom over the phone when I was 17. I was raised by a cousin, and I wasn't allowed to really talk to people and stuff like that. And if I did, she eavesdropped. My sister sent me a birthday card. She opened it before I did, and read it, you know, stuff like that. So my mom, I had to sneak and speak with my mom at my job in the mall. I explained my whole life story to my supervisor, and she allowed that for me. And I think my mom died when I was like 24. I don't know. I can't remember exactly, but I have a few years with her. It was cool. It was nice.
How was you and your dad's relationship?
My dad and I was with my father for a while. My dad stole me from my mom, so you guys will get that story later on. This is an interview video, kind of, so there'll be others like this as well, but you'll get to piece all the puzzles together eventually. But my dad stole me from my mother, and we ended up hopping around a lot of places. So I bonded with him when I was really, really small. I have like very vague memories with my dad. Like I remember getting my ears pierced. I remember him with me roller skating on the street and stuff like that. Our relationship was really close, as close as it could be, because my dad was an addict. When crack came out, my dad was a crackhead. Like, you know, Vietnam messed him up. Unfortunately, that war made him crazy, and yeah, it's sad. But our relationship was cool. I used to have to sneak and speak to him on the phone. I couldn't talk to him while she was home because she would pick up the line and listen to our conversations. So, and it was difficult because he was on drugs. He was never stationary, so he was never in one place long. So it was kind of hard for me to keep up. You know, he didn't have a phone number. You know, he was on drugs. So, but it was cool. We were cool. I think once I met my mom, And I was also an adult. I bonded with her. So sometimes, not that I feel guilty, but I feel like I kind of miss her more than I miss him. But the relationship was different. But I was cool with both of my parents. You know, I hated them a lot growing up because I felt like they had abandoned me. And I felt like, you know, drugs should not, you shouldn't choose drugs over me. You shouldn't choose that. Like, I should be way more important to you than drugs. But as I grew older and I kind of understood what drugs are, I had to get past that. But it was cool. That's it for now. Okay. Um. So where was I? So yeah. So my dad met my mom. My mom was what I called a troubled soul. She was like running away from home and rebellious, and she was in foster care. And so she met my dad when she was 15. She had me when she was 19, and she made sure to tell me when I met her that I wasn't a bastard child, because I had heard that, like, all kind of stuff about her, lies and stuff that were made up about my mom. But she told me that they were married, and that my dad was very abusive towards her, except while she was pregnant. And she said that she did not want me to come. Our birthdays are a day apart. I'm January 9th and she's January 8th. She went into labor at her birthday party. And so either way, when I was born, she said that my father jacked her up by her hospital gown in the bed the day that I was born, and told her, if you hurt my daughter in any way, I'll kill you. And she said because of the people he knew and the way he treated her, she actually believed what he said. And he broke her nose twice. He knocked out her teeth. He was just very abusive. She said a lot of the times I watched a lot of it, and I'm pretty sure that had a negative effect on me subconsciously. I know, like, I hold my stress and anger, just stress overall, internally. So, like, things come in that will normally, like, people will react to, I don't react. It gets buried immediately. I usually know that something's wrong. Like, I'll take, like, deep breaths, or like, my neck will hurt. Like, all of my neck and my shoulders will hurt. So that's how I know I hold stress in. But I'll just be like, hey, good morning, how you doing? Like there's nothing wrong with me. So I'm pretty sure that some of the things that I observed as a baby and the things that I experienced being abused affected me in that way. I am grateful, though, that I'm not, like, I don't have any mental disabilities. You know, I do, but I can help my students who do. I have a lot of students who were abused, and I do help them. I have students that have multiple personalities. I have students that have schizophrenia. I have students who see dead people. I have students who have panic attacks, and you know, just a variety. ADHD. I have ADHD too. So, you know, and I help them through all of those things, you know, depression and stuff like that. So either way, so I was born on Super Bowl Sunday, and my father's favorite team won. My mom said that it was pretty good for a little while, but my dad went right back into being abusive. She said that she had to iron my diapers. For those of you who are young, back in the day, the little spit up bib thing that we use now to wipe the baby's mouth were our diapers. It's like cotton, and she said that she had to iron that. She had to iron my diapers. And that he was just very violent and mean. When he passed away, and I met her shortly after he passed away, she asked me, how did he die? And I told her that he had a brain tumor. And she was like, I knew it. And I was like, oh, what? And she was just like, I knew something was wrong with him. I knew something was wrong with his mind. He developed a brain tumor and lung tumor as a result of Agent Orange, which is a chemical that was sprayed during Vietnam. Those of you who are in school, go and research it so you can learn about that war. It was very bloody, very gory, and it messed up a lot of people. And that was a domino effect on a lot of their children, like me. I ended up being in foster care and being abused in several ways as a result, my opinion, from my father serving in that war, because he couldn't come back here and function properly as a human being, as an adult. So my mom told me that I probably, it was like a year and a half, maybe two, and she said that she had wanted to stop using drugs. So she had started this thing where she would get the drugs and she would put them in the freezer, or she would get the drugs and she would put them in a cookie jar. She would just hide them somewhere, and then my dad would come and look for them, and he couldn't find them, and then he'd tear up the house, and then he'd tear her ass up. So she said that eventually she just gave up on hiding the drugs. And so hold on, I have a question. Well, my student has a question. Yes.
So is Vietnam what made your father violent, or was he naturally violent?
No, Vietnam made my dad violent. My dad was, they said a lot of my personality is very similar to his. You know how I'm always laughing and making y'all laugh and clowning. And my dad was a funny guy. He was a people person. He was very talkative. That's where I get all the talking from. And he did not want to join the army. He was forced to join. He was drafted. And he saw a lot of things that some the mind can't handle. A lot of people can't handle things like that. That's it's traumatic. So like he told me that he saw people being blown apart, like right next to you, and the blood splattering on you, and you can't help them. Like they gone, they're dead, and you gotta just keep going and doing what you're supposed to do. He told me that I told him I was doing a project. I think I'd done one when I was in 6th grade. It was probably a way for me to connect and bond with my dad on Vietnam. And then I had spoken with, I think I did another report in high school, and I was speaking with, we had a police officer there and a teacher. We had a couple of people that I kind of interviewed that I knew were Vietnam veterans as well. And I can't remember, I think it was my dad that told me that, like, they were giving them drugs. Like, they were sending drugs. We were sending drugs to Vietnam for our soldiers because they were freaking out, yeah. So much, they were scared to go fight. So they would get them high on, like, cocaine and stuff. So they'd be like, ah, you know, and ah. So they would go and be amped up and crazy, like, say hello to my little friend. What's the movie? The Godfather? Is it The Godfather? I think so. But, yeah. So a lot of people came back on drugs because they were doing it over there. And, you know, people do what they call self-medication. So you have people that are alcoholics, or people who do heroin, or people who do cocaine, or while you're high, you just high. You don't think about it, or you have high that makes you down and you chill, and then you have high that amps you up. But either way, your mind is not on that. You just like chilling. You just like, yeah, I'm cooling. And what happens while you're high or drunk, when you self-medicate, you don't think about stuff. You know, like I know a person whose child died and they found the body and they never drank. And that person drank every day after that. Because it played, she told me it plays over and over in my mind. I see it every morning I wake up. The only time I don't think about it is when I sleep. So she started drinking. You know, so people, to forget what they saw, they drink or they do drugs. And that's what my dad did. That's it? Okay. So my mom said that this one particular day, my dad came home and he was looking for the drug. And she was just like, she had stopped hiding them so long ago. She didn't know why he came to her. She was just like, I stopped doing that. Like, what are you talking about? And he tore up the house, and then he tore her ass up. and she told me that he beat her for like a weekend. And she said I was in a playpen in the living room watching all of it. And then she said I knew that your father was going to kill me that weekend. She said I knew it. And so she said he fell asleep in a recliner, and she snuck to the kitchen and she called her friends. And she had friends that were bikers. And she said she told them, like, she was telling them everything, and she was crying, and she was, like sniffing snot and tears. And then all of a sudden she said my dad was right behind her, and he was like, tell him you joking. Tell him you're joking. And she was just like, I'm joking. She said, of course, they didn't believe her because she's bawling. She's crying real hard. And she said that they told her that when they kicked the door in, that she was in the living room, lifeless, passed out. And my dad had his hands around her neck, and he was just strangling her. And she was already passed out. He was still choking her. And I was just in the playpen watching it. Of course, I don't remember that, but the brain doesn't forget. So they told her that they tried to rough him up, but because they really didn't want to focus on beating his ass, because they didn't know if she was dead or not. So they just grabbed her and took her to the hospital. They didn't think anything about me and him. They just grabbed her and took her to the hospital. And she said that when they released her from the hospital and she came home, we were gone. She never saw me again. And she said that birthdays were really hard because our birthdays are a day apart. Mother's Day was hard. And she said eventually she just had to give her mother my photos because she couldn't deal with looking at me anymore. And she never thought that she was going to see me again. She never thought she was going to see me again. So that's how that went. And my mother was a drug addict. She did different drugs throughout her youth, but her favorite, her drug of preference was heroin. But yeah, so she said she never saw me again, and she was afraid of my father. When I showed her how my dad was living, and like as a crackhead and a drug addict and stuff like that, she was just like, oh my God, like if I would have known that he was living like that, I would have come, before. Because I really was excited about meeting her, but I was angry because I was just like, damn, like you just left me. Oh, by the way, I'm biracial. As you probably already assumed. My mom's Irish descent. She's white, and my father is Black American and also Native American descent. And you can see all of those features in there. Like when I go to the Hard Rock Hotel, they all ask me what tribe I'm from. When my hair is straight, though. But they can see it. They say they know I'm not Seminole. I don't know what I am as far as a Native is concerned, but you can see it. But either way, so yeah, I'm biracial. But I was very angry with my mom. I remember speaking with my mom when I was little. She called the house where I was at. So that just amplified my anger for her because I was like, wait, you know where I'm at. My mom did not remember any of that. When I met her, she told me that there are so many parts of her memory that are gone. And we were supposed to go and get hypnosis together because she wanted to do that for me. She wanted to be able to share that information with me, and she felt guilty that she couldn't remember certain things and she couldn't answer questions for me. But she passed away. We were supposed to do two things before she passed away. We were supposed to do hypnosis, and we were supposed to get tattoos together. And she passed away before we did that. But so yeah, I was like angry, and I was just like, you left me here. I remember when I was in I think kindergarten, we got to choose. We did red balloons, and it's just so funny the things that you just like remember. and you could write a note to someone special. And I remember I wanted to write a note to my mommy because I still knew my dad. I knew of my dad, and I did see my father occasionally because he was in Florida. Because remember, I was being raised by a relative. That relative is from his side. My mom's family, I didn't meet until I was 17. And I feel like my grandmother is racist. I don't know if she is or isn't. We don't get along. So that's the end of that. I have one little cousin who my mom made me promise her that I will always keep in contact with, but my grandmother controls and manipulates her whole family, so I don't hear from any of them. But my mom told me that she was very afraid for my little cousin because she said my little cousin reminded my mom of herself. And she said because I was so like reserved and like an old lady when I was young, and now I'm all youthful. She just liked the way I was living, and she felt as if I would be a good influence on my little cousin because she said there's just things she does that just remind me of me, and I'm so scared for her. And she wanted me to keep in contact with her. She made me promise that I would, but unfortunately, my grandmother and I don't get along, and because we don't speak, no one else in the family, she forbade like all of them. I'm assuming because I don't hear from any of them, but whatever. But my mom, when she came to visit me, I was very upset with her because I said, you knew where I was. And I was telling her about the balloon. And I was just like, I sent the balloon to you. And like, I remember everything so clearly. Like, I was probably like 5 years old, and I was on the playground, and we released these red balloons, and they had a note on it. And we did, I think it was an index card, and we tied it on the balloon. And I remember that. Like, and I remember like being so excited and just knowing that my mommy is gonna like get this balloon. And of course that thing probably like got on a branch somewhere. But like I just was very angry with her. I was angry because I was angry with both of my parents because I felt like no one cared about me. I felt like my neighbors, like people knew that I was being abused and nobody did anything about it. No one called the police. No one cared. And then I was just like, damn, like my mom and dad don't care either. And I think the hardest part of my life was probably adolescence, like middle school, maybe 7th grade, 8th grade. Um, I think that was probably the hardest part of my life because you're going through all these transformations, and then it's just like I think the anger from my parents was stronger then. So anyways, all right, so my father steals me from my mom. And I don't know, like we bounced around so many places. I've heard different stories from different people, like excuse me, living in the projects in the Dixie Manor projects. By the way, I heard Venus and Serena lived in the Dixie Manor projects in Boca Raton. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but my family's from those projects in Boca Raton, Florida. And I was told that like my dad used to take like tranquilizers, and like he'd be knocked out for like a week, like 3 days, some shit like that. And he, like I would be crying, and people say that they would pass by the windows, a little window, and then I would be crying, and I'd be like, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. And like I'm like, okay, like when I was speaking to these people, I didn't want to be rude, so I allowed them to share the stories with me. But in my mind I'm like, well damn, like y'all hear a baby crying and saying that they're hungry, and so you're not gonna do anything? And this is why I do what I do. This is why I share my stories and I connect with my students, and I do what I do for my students, because I want them to know that you don't have to turn out angry. You don't have to turn out mean and in pain and suffering emotionally for the rest of your life. And that someone does care, and that someone has experienced what you're experiencing, and it's going to be okay. Because there's so many people that could tell me all of these stories, but I'm like, damn, like, you didn't do anything? So, like, I know I came to Florida before I was 3. So I was like a toddler, and I was saying I was hungry. So what the fuck were you doing? Nothing. You were listening to me while you passed by the window. Okay, interesting. But yeah, so like I've heard like stories like I'd be in there crying. I've heard that my dad would meet you today and be like, "Oh yeah, hey, here, babysit her for me," which probably is why I ended up being molested before. I think I came to Florida when I was like 3 or 4, maybe closer to 4 years old, and I was already molested before I came here. And he was like running trafficking cocaine back and forth between like Georgia and Fort Lauderdale, I think. And like I just get dropped off with random people. I know I stayed with a family in Georgia who I got to meet later on. They are really nice people. Terrence, Tyler, my little brother, and Undeb. They took me in, while my dad did his thing. I also lived with a relative here and his wife. They potty trained me. I'm not going to shout them out because I'm not sure if they're comfortable with that. So, but yeah, like, who else did I live with? A lady named Jewel. She's the person who actually turned me into custody. Today it's known as DCF, but back then it was called HRS. And her name is like all over my documents. She was the person who, I think my dad like dropped me off and was like, "Oh yeah, I'll be back." And it was like 2 weeks. And she was like, "What the hell? Like, I'm babysitting this kid forever." And come to find out, he was trafficking cocaine and got arrested. And yeah, I got taken into custody. That was in Georgia. So like, I don't know where we were. I'm assuming it was between Georgia and Florida, but when I was taken into foster care, it was in Georgia. I actually moved in with a lovely woman who I've always wished was the one who raised me, Helen. That's not her full name, but I'll just leave it at Helen. She was not allowed to adopt me because I was her very first. This is what her daughter told me later on, because I tracked her down, and then the daughter changed all her numbers. Yeah. Promised to let me talk to Helen, promised to let me talk with everyone, gave me numbers, answered all my questions, and then like changed all the numbers. So I couldn't get in contact with them ever again. That hurt me because that lady was probably one of the few people that actually gave a damn about me. So that tells me that her daughter had an issue with her mother and I relationship, her mother's relationship with me, because why else would you block me? Anyways, but her daughter told me that they would not allow her. I think it was her daughter that told me. Someone told me, when you have your first foster kid, we're not allowed to adopt them because they needed you to be able to be strong enough to release the child back into the system, because you're going to be in rotation. Like, you're going to have kids coming in and out. And if you attach yourself to all of them, you're going to have 50 kids in your house and you're not going to be able to take care of them. And I, unfortunately, was her very first foster kid. Now, maybe if I was her second or third, they would have allowed her to keep me and adopt me, but I was not. I remember everything about that lady's home. I remember she could cook. Oh my God, her food was so good. I remember being loved there. I don't know if anything negative happened. I remember having an issue somewhere with me down there crying and being little and somebody lifting me up. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's one of the molesting scenarios or whatever. I do remember that. Or, look, I could have washed myself and put too much soap in there and it was burning. I don't know. But I remember that. I remember screaming, and I remember people coming and like issues with that as a kid. I don't know. But I remember having good times there. I remember, I don't know, I just remember her being really nice. And so I left her, and I remember the plane ride to Florida. I remember coming here and being very excited. I remember my relative telling me, she showed me this belt on the door down the hall, and she was like, "You see this? See this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "As long as you tell the truth, I ain't gonna use it. So I was like, okay. And I will never forget. I don't know what I did, but I will never forget the first time she beat the shit out of me with that same belt. And I had told her the truth. And that was the end of that. Um, and it just got worse from there. So I am 35 minutes into this video. Do you have any questions for me? Okay. Um, yeah, I remember when you're little, you feel like it's stuff that you're doing wrong. You blame yourself a lot. I remember I had this little Bible. Someone stole it when I was in high school. And I used to put, please God, make me be a good girl, so that I used to call her Granny because her grandkids called her Granny, and I was little, so I was copying them. And then sometimes I would call her Mommy, and then eventually it just turned into Ma. So I just called her Mom when I became a teenager. Um, and I remember writing that, like, so that I don't make her mad at me. Like, I remember writing that. I had a little pocket Bible. It was blue, and yeah, I used to write that a lot. I remember being excited that I was coming there, and I thought it was going to be really nice, and it wasn't. It was horrible, and I think I'm going to close with that, because then that starts a new chapter in my life. But do you have any questions for me before I close the first video? Do you have any questions about, like, me leaving foster care or my experience in foster care? Um,
So, when you were flown down here in Florida, who were you with?
I flew with a white lady, a social worker, and she had taken me to the store, and she bought me the earrings and necklace, ring and bracelet, plastic jewelry set. And I remember when we got on the plane, she opened it for me and I put everything on. And I remember, I'm a very picky eater, by the way, everybody. And I remember they gave us, like, see, now they don't really serve food anymore on the planes, but back then you used to get a meal. And when we were taking off, she made me look out the window and she was like, look at the people. She was like, watch them. They're going to become like little ants. And I remember that. And then I remember her trying to get me to eat the food on the plane. And I was just like, no. And so I ate crackers, I think. And I remember when we landed, my relative who raised me, her grandkids and her, like, they were all at the airport and to pick me up. And I remember being excited and happy. I knew them because I'd seen them before, because my dad visited and stuff like that. So, and I lived with one of them prior, not her, but one of them before, the ones who potty trained me. So I knew who they were. So I was excited. But yeah, I was with the social worker. The social worker had to fly me down. That's it. Okay. All right. So again, you guys are tuned in to TESH Talk TV. And I will say that I am sharing real life and gaining real strength. And I'm hoping that when I share this real life, that you will gain real strength as well. Again, my goal is to encourage, motivate our youth to look for better and in themselves and in our society, and give back once they discover that goodness. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel and help me spread all this happiness. All right. See you later.